Hello everyone. Today we're working on Module 2, Lesson 14, and we're going to use fraction and decimal multiplication to express equivalent measurements. Last night we used whole number multiplication because we were converting from larger units to smaller units. And this time we're going to be converting from smaller units to larger units. So our answers are going to get smaller. We'll start off with 14 days equals how many weeks? Now days are smaller than weeks. So that means that we are going to have fewer weeks than we are days. Our answer is going to be less than 14, in other words. So we know that there are 7 days. 1 week equals 7 days. And if we were to look at a tape diagram of that, we could show 1 week right here. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If we divided it into 7 parts, then one of those parts is going to be 1 day. And so what that means is that 1 day is the same as 1/7 of a week, because it's one of 7 equal parts in a week. So if I wanted to flip this around, 1 week equals 7 days. 1 day equals 1/7 of a week. So up here, where we're going to follow the same process that we did yesterday, where we take 14 times 1 day, and now I'm going to switch my units, and I'm going to look down here. 1 day equals 1/7 of a week. So I have 14 times 1/7 of a week. Now this is a place, and this is going to happen a lot in 5th grade, where everything you may have thought you knew is changing a little bit. We have always assumed that if we multiply, we get an answer that is greater than both our factors. But as you may have noticed in last Thursday's lesson, when we multiplied by 98/100ths, which is slightly less than 1, our answer was actually smaller than one of our factors that we began with. And this is what happens if we multiply by a number that's less than 1, then our product is going to be smaller than at least one of the factors. So if you look at what we're doing here, 14 times 1/7 of a week, that means that we have 14 copies of 1/7. And that means that we're going to have 14 sevenths week eventually. And the rule, if you want to make a shortcut, is that you multiply the factor times the numerator. But if you also want to think about it, 1/7 plus 1/7 is 2/7, plus 1/7 is 3/7, plus 1/7 is 4/7. Every time we add another seventh on, the numerator is going to grow by 1. So if we add it together 14 times, or multiply by 14, we'll have 14/7 of a week at the end. And as you know, whenever we have a numerator that is larger than the denominator, that means that we can turn that into a whole number, hopefully, or a mixed number, if not a whole number. So every time I take out 7/7, I get 1 whole week. And I can take out 7/7 2 times. So my answer here will be 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Now, you may notice that although we multiplied, at the end, what we actually did was divide. And you will hear me say this many, many times over this year. Every fraction is a division problem. So what we did at the end was we divided that 14 times 7 right here. Sorry, 14 divided by 7, because every fraction is a division problem. And this fraction, 14/7, tells me 14 divided by 7, which equals 2. And that's our final answer. Now it's your turn. We are going to convert 24 feet into the equivalent number of yards. And as you recall, there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So what I'd like you to do is figure out how many yards are in 1 foot, because you're going to need to know how many yards are in 1 foot to make your equivalent unit over here. You can draw a tape diagram to figure that out. You're going to go through the process, go back to the previous slide and watch what I did if you need to. Watch it again, and then write your answer on the Edpuzzle quiz. Now we're going to work with some metric units. 195 centimeters equals how many meters? Now, I remember that there are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. And if I were to make a tape diagram, and of course there's too many parts to do all 100 of them, so I'll just say 1, 2, let's say this is a meter. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to go up to 100. I'm not going to show them all because I don't want to make my tape diagram that big. And just one of those is going to be 1/100th of a meter is going to equal 1 centimeter. Okay, those are equivalent. 1/100th of a meter, because if I divide a meter into 100 parts, each one of those parts is 1 centimeter. So now I have the equivalency that I'm going to need to solve this problem going through our normal steps. So 195 centimeters is the same as 195 copies of 1 centimeter. And now I'm going to substitute my equivalent fraction down here, 195 times 1/100th of a meter, and that means that I'm going to get 195 hundredths, which means that I'll have 1 whole meter and 95 hundredths left over. Now I just solved it using vertical fractions, as we like to call them in class, but I could have done it with decimal fractions too. I could have called, instead of 1/100th, I could have written for this step 195 times 1/100th of a meter, in which case I am going to get 1 95 hundredths meter. And this is written like this when we write it as a decimal. 1 95 hundredths, we say them both exactly the same way, 1 95 hundredths of a meter. But since I did, I'm going to write it as a decimal fraction up in my answer, 1 95 hundredths meters. 195 centimeters is the same as 1 whole meter and 95 hundredths of a meter. Now I'd like you to give it a shot. We have 4,500 grams, and we want to know how many kilograms. So I'm going to tell you that 1 kilogram equals 1,000 grams. And you're going to have to figure out, in that case, how much of a kilogram is 1 gram. 1 gram equals how many kilograms? Your answer will be a fraction, a decimal fraction, if that's the way you prefer to work with it. You can also use vertical fractions if that makes it easier for you to understand. But when you write your answer down, I'd like you to write it as a decimal fraction, please. Now, this seems a little complex, and we're bending some of the rules that we've held on to. But you will find that 5th grade is kind of like the stepping off place for rules not changing. The rules still apply, but we're heading into new situations where the rules simply become a little more complicated. And right now we're realizing that when we multiply by numbers less than 1, our answers are going to get smaller instead of larger. So go ahead, do a tape diagram if you need to figure out what 1 gram is going to equal how many kilograms, and then use that unit to insert in your the steps in the process, figure out your answer, write it down on the Edpuzzle quiz. Now we're going to complete a story problem. A container holds 16 cups of juice. Convert the capacity to pints. This is exactly what we've been doing so far in the lesson today, but you're going to change the words into an equation. You'll need to have a blank for the pints because we don't know how many pints yet. However, I have told you what the conversion factor is. I've at least shown you what the conversion factor for cups into pints is. You're going to have to figure out what the conversion factor of pints to cups is so that you can use that in the process to find the answer. Now this seems a little difficult, I know, and that's okay. It is. It's a preview of what we're going to be moving into after this trimester when we start working with fractions more often. So this is just our first step. Do your best to figure it out. We'll be working tomorrow. We'll be doing all story problems like this and figuring out an expression to use instead of the words, and then we'll be solving those expressions using multiplication. So do your best to get it. If it's very confusing to you, don't worry, I'll work with you tomorrow, and we're going to be working on this again as homework tomorrow night and on Thursday. So do your best job, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.